I thought we were just heading up to the cabin to unplug, relax, maybe fish a little and sit in silence without notifications buzzing in our ears. But the second Liam stepped out of the bathroom, towel slung low around his waist, something in me shifted in a way I wasn't ready for. I'd seen him a million times at the pool, in gym class, even shirtless during summer hikes, but this time, the look in his eyes and the heat under my skin told me everything had changed. It was supposed to be a digital detox, but it turned into something I still haven't stopped thinking about. Liam and I have been best friends since 7th grade. We were the kind of pair people always assumed would drift apart after high school, but we didn't. If anything, college only made us closer. We weren't roommates, but we still saw each other almost every weekend, and every time we hung out it felt like breathing got easier. I never really questioned how deep it went. Not until that weekend. The cabin belonged to Liam's uncle, small, quiet, nestled by a lake with trees that swallowed the view in every direction. It had no TV, no internet, and we'd both agreed to turn off our phones for the full 3 days. It was meant to be a detox from the noise and a chance to reset. "We're gonna be bored out of our minds," I'd said, joking as we unpacked. "Exactly," Liam had replied with a grin. "Isn't that the point?" The first day passed like a dream. We hiked around the lake, made sandwiches on the porch, skipped rocks until sunset. That night, we lit a fire and talked for hours. It was easy, like it always was with Liam, talking about life, college, our dumbest memories. We didn't talk about girls. Or guys. We never had. But I started to notice things. The way he looked at me a second longer than usual when I laughed. The way his knee kept brushing mine under the table and never pulled away. The way his voice dropped just slightly when he said my name. It might have been nothing. I told myself that. But it didn't feel like nothing. The sauna was a surprise. We hadn't noticed it until the second morning, tucked behind the cabin with an old cedar door and a simple stove in the corner. It still worked barely, but we managed to get it warm enough to sweat. And Liam, of course, insisted we try it. "Best way to get the toxins out," he said, already unbuttoning his shirt. I hesitated a little longer than I should have. "We're really doing this?" He shrugged. "We said no phones, no distractions. Let's go all in." So I followed. Stripped down to nothing but towels, skin already flushed from the heat of the room, we sat side by side on the wooden bench, sweat beading on our backs, silence settling between us. At first, it felt normal. Like just another moment in our long history of moments. But then Liam turned his head and looked at me. Really looked. And that's when everything started to change. The sauna was hotter than I expected, not just physically, but in a way I couldn't name, a kind of heavy, humming tension that pressed down on my chest more than the heat itself. My skin felt tight and tingling, my breathing shallow, and I could feel the sweat trailing down my back like a slow reminder that something inside me was shifting. Liam sat next to me, our shoulders almost touching, both of us wrapped in nothing but loosely tied towels. The steam hung in the air like a curtain, softening the light and blurring the space between us. I glanced at him, trying to be subtle, but there was no pretending anymore. His body was lean, familiar, too familiar, maybe. I'd seen it so many times before, at the lake, in locker rooms, under summer suns when we ran barefoot through the trails as kids. But never like this. Never when I was so aware of him. And judging by the way he kept shifting, the way his knee kept bumping mine, I wasn't the only one. "You okay?" he asked suddenly, voice a little hoarse from the heat. I nodded, though my mouth felt dry. "Yeah. Just hot." His lips curled slightly, and I saw him look down, not at the floor, but at my legs. Then he reached forward to pour a scoop of water over the hot stones. The sizzle echoed, and the new wave of steam rose between us, making the air feel thicker, more private. Like we were suddenly wrapped inside our own little world. When he leaned back, he didn't settle quite as far from me this time. His thigh brushed mine, warm and damp, and stayed there. I didn't move. "I'm glad we came here," Liam said, voice quieter now. "Felt like I needed this." "Yeah," I said. "Me too. It's been hard to think lately." He glanced at me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "What do you think about?" he asked. The question landed between us, heavy. My heart thumped louder than it should have. "About what I'm feeling," I said. "Stuff I don't always understand." He nodded slowly, eyes still on me. "Same." We were quiet again, but the silence wasn't comfortable anymore, it was charged. Buzzing. His hand was resting on the bench between us, his pinky close enough to touch mine. I couldn't help it, I moved just enough for our fingers to brush. And neither of us pulled away. That tiny contact said more than all the late-night talks, all the laughs, all the years of inside jokes and secrets. It wasn't playful now. It was real. Liam turned toward me slightly, his towel slipping just a little lower around his waist. My eyes dropped there without meaning to, and by the time I looked back up, he was already watching me. "I don't know why this feels different," he said, voice soft. "Because maybe it always was," I answered. The tension in the air was a thread pulled tight, and I knew we were just one breath away from crossing something we couldn't uncross. And then it happened. Liam shifted again, a small, instinctive movement, and the towel around his waist loosened and slowly slid down, bunching around his thighs without him adjusting it. He didn't flinch. He didn't joke. He just sat there, chest rising and falling, eyes on mine like he was daring me to see him, really see him. "Liam," I whispered. He leaned closer. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice barely audible over the hiss of the stove. But I didn't. I reached for him. And when our lips met, it wasn't awkward or hesitant. It was slow and heated, our mouths tasting salt and steam and the weight of everything we hadn't said for years. His hand slid behind my neck, guiding me in, and I leaned into him fully, heart pounding, body alive in a way I'd never known. Hey, thanks for watching until this point. Please leave a comment if you're enjoying the video. It really helps us grow the channel and reach more people. And hey, thank you very much. Let's get back to story. My own towel was barely holding on now, and I felt the press of his chest against mine, skin to skin, slick with heat. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Everything was said in that kiss, in the way his fingers moved over my back, in the way my hands gripped his sides, in the quiet sound he made when our foreheads touched again and we realized we weren't pulling away. The sauna wasn't just hot. It was burning. And we were burning with it. We stayed tangled in the heat of the sauna for what felt like forever, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. But in those minutes, everything I thought I knew about Liam, about us, started to unravel and reshape itself. This wasn't some one-time curiosity. It wasn't just the heat or the isolation or the lack of distractions. This was something that had been buried deep between us for years, slowly blooming in silence until it finally broke the surface. And it was beautiful. His kiss tasted like salt and steam and something electric that danced under my skin. My fingers were lost in his damp hair, gently tugging as our mouths moved together, slow and searching. The way his hands traveled my back, firm but trembling slightly, sent shivers up my spine even though the room was burning. It was like we were both discovering something at the exact same time, and neither of us wanted to stop. When we finally came up for air, Liam didn't move far. His forehead rested against mine, breath still uneven, chest rising and falling against me. I could feel the soft tremble in him, not fear, but intensity, like even he couldn't believe how natural this felt. "Are we really doing this?" he whispered, his voice raspy. I nodded. "Yeah, we are." And somehow those few words made it all real. We didn't speak much after that. There was no need. Everything we felt was pouring out of us in every kiss, every soft moan, every touch. My towel had slipped completely off at some point, discarded and forgotten, and Liam's had followed soon after. But there was nothing awkward about the nakedness, only warmth, comfort, and hunger that neither of us knew we'd been carrying. Liam's hands explored me like he was learning the topography of someone he thought he already knew, fingertips tracing down my arms, along my chest, then carefully to my hips where he hesitated for a second. I guided his hand, silently telling him I wanted it too, and he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. I kissed his collarbone, then down to his shoulder, breathing him in, letting my hands find his waist, his lower back, the curve where his skin was still slick from the heat. We moved slowly, like time didn't matter anymore, like there was no world outside that wooden room. "I've thought about this," he murmured at one point, voice thick with emotion. I didn't know if I was allowed to. "You are," I whispered back. "So have I." His hand slid to the side of my neck, thumb brushing just under my jaw as he kissed me again, deeper now, full of emotion. Our bodies found each other like they had always been meant to meet this way. The rhythm of our movements grew more urgent and yet somehow still careful, tender. It wasn't rough or fumbling or wild. It was honest. A soft surrender, the kind that only happens when everything in you finally says yes. We didn't speak during the moment we crossed the line fully. We were too lost in it, too overwhelmed by how right it felt. I felt him tense, then melt, his mouth on my shoulder, my name whispered like a confession. Afterward, we lay together, breathless and flushed, our limbs still tangled, heads resting against the warm wooden wall. The heat of the sauna had cooled slightly, but the heat between us hadn't faded. His arm was draped over my chest, my fingers tracing idle shapes on his forearm as we stared at the ceiling in stunned, quiet satisfaction. "Do you think we ruined it?" he asked after a long pause, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I turned my head toward him, met his eyes. No. I think we finally understood it. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yeah. I think so too. Neither of us moved to get up right away. We were content to stay there, in the silence, in the closeness, in the calm that followed a storm we didn't realize had been building for years. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, I said after a moment. Good, he replied. Because I want to remember everything. I looked over at him again, his bare chest rising slowly, his skin glistening, and I reached for his hand. Then let's not run from it, I said. Let's see where it takes us. He didn't say anything, but he squeezed my hand. And in that single gesture, I felt something bigger than fear or confusion. I felt hope. The air outside the sauna felt colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the sudden contrast, or maybe it was something else, the way everything felt quieter now, more delicate. Liam and I had barely spoken as we left the heat behind, grabbing towels and moving in sync like we were still tethered by something invisible. Something new. Something real. Back inside the cabin, the silence followed us. It wasn't awkward, but it held weight, like the space between us was full of everything we had just shared. Everything we'd just crossed. I sat down on the edge of the couch, towel wrapped loosely around my waist, hair still damp and skin warm. Liam moved into the kitchen, opening the fridge like we hadn't just kissed, touched, and breathed each other in like we were starving. You want water? He asked, like it was any other day. Sure. He brought over 2 bottles, handed me one, then sat on the arm of the chair across from me. I could feel his eyes on me, but he didn't speak right away. He took a long drink, then exhaled slowly like he was working up to something. That wasn't nothing, he finally said. No, I agreed. It really wasn't. He nodded. I just needed to hear you say it. There was a beat of silence. The fire from earlier had burned down to a low, glowing heat in the cabin's wood stove. Outside the window, the lake shimmered faintly under the rising moon. Are we going to talk about it? I asked, softer this time. Liam looked up. I want to. I just don't want to say the wrong thing. I gave a quiet laugh, not mocking, just nervous. Same. He shifted from the chair to the floor beside me, legs crossed, arms resting on his knees. Closer now? More grounded. It was like he couldn't sit far away anymore, even if he tried. I've had feelings, he said carefully. For a while now. I didn't know what they were at first. But when you said we should come here, I kind of hoped something might come up. I blinked. You did? Yeah, he said. Not that I expected that. But I wasn't surprised when it happened. I sat with that for a second, letting it settle over me. My chest felt tight, but in a good way, like something that had been clenched too long was finally opening. I guess I thought I was just close to you because we've always been that way, I said. But today, I saw you. Like really saw you. And I don't think I can unsee it. Liam reached up and brushed his fingers lightly against my knee, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch me now, but needed to try. So what now? I looked at him. His eyes were soft, a little nervous, but so full of hope it made my breath catch. I don't know, I admitted. But I know I don't want to pretend nothing happened. Me neither. I reached for his hand again, just like I had in the sauna. He laced his fingers through mine and let out a breath that shook just a little. I feel like we just broke something wide open, he said. Maybe we didn't break it, I replied. Maybe we just uncovered it. He nodded slowly, and for a while, we just sat there, hands linked, bodies cooling, the weight of what had passed still clinging to our skin like a second layer. I rested my head against the back of the couch, closing my eyes. Liam shifted so his shoulder touched my leg, and I felt that same current spark again. But this time, it didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like we were stepping into something new together. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds and the soft creak of the old cabin walls. The air was cool but not cold, and for a moment I wasn't sure if I'd dreamed it all, the sauna, the kiss, the way Liam's body had felt against mine like he belonged there. But then I turned over. And he was there. Still asleep, face relaxed, chest rising slowly beneath the blanket we must have pulled over us sometime in the night. He looked peaceful. Not like someone who'd just broken a years-long friendship. More like someone who'd finally let something go. I watched him for a moment, letting myself smile. It wasn't a wide, beaming grin, it was quieter. Real. Because this wasn't about fantasy. It wasn't a secret fling or a dare or something to forget when we went back to the world. It was something that mattered. And the scariest part? It didn't scare me anymore. I got up gently and pulled on a hoodie and sweatpants, padding barefoot into the kitchen to make coffee. The smell filled the room fast, rich and grounding, and I poured 2 mugs just as I heard the soft creak of the bedroom floor. Liam appeared, hair tousled, hoodie halfway zipped, and when he saw me, he smiled, sleepy and a little shy, but not regretful. "Never that. You're up early," he said, rubbing at his eyes. "I didn't want to miss this," I replied, offering him a mug. He took it, our fingers brushing briefly, and sipped without saying anything for a long moment. We stood there in silence, leaning against opposite counters, letting the weight of what we'd shared settle into the daylight. "Are you okay?" he asked finally. I nodded. "Yeah, more than okay." He looked relieved. "Good. Because last night, that was real to me. It was real to me too." He came closer, not rushing, just walking slowly like he didn't want to startle whatever had bloomed between us. And when he reached me, he gently bumped my shoulder with his. "Would it be too weird if I kissed you right now?" "Not weird at all." He leaned in, and it was different this time. No heat, no steam, no rush. Just lips to lips, soft and sweet and full of the quiet question, "Are you still with me?" And my answer was yes. Every time. We spent the rest of the morning bundled in blankets on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the lake sparkle. At one point, Liam rested his head on my shoulder, and I didn't say anything. I just held him there, letting his warmth settle into me. We talked eventually about what would happen when we left, what it would mean, what we were ready to admit. It wasn't some perfect script. There were pauses, nervous laughs, a few I don't knows. But we meant every word. "I don't want this to be just a cabin story," Liam said at one point. "It's not," I told him. "This started way before we got here." He smiled at that big, wide, real? And when he leaned over to kiss me again, slow and certain, I knew this wasn't something I was going to forget. Not when we got home. Not ever. Because something about Liam had always been different. And now I finally understood why. Leaving the cabin felt like waking up from a dream, not because it wasn't real, but because everything outside of it suddenly felt too loud, too fast, too different from the quiet world Liam and I had shared for those few days. The air was cooler as we loaded our bags into the car, the morning sky pale and streaked with soft clouds, and for once, neither of us reached for our phones. We didn't need the noise yet. Liam stood by the open trunk, one hand resting on his backpack, the other rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was overthinking. I knew that posture. It meant he was nervous. Probably about what came next. So I said gently, coming up beside him. "Still good." He looked over at me. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "I just don't want things to change the second we get back." I nodded. "They will. But that's not a bad thing." He smiled, then leaned in and kissed me, a short, quiet thing that still somehow made my chest tighten. Then he closed the trunk and climbed into the driver's seat, and we pulled out of the gravel driveway back onto the winding road that led toward real life. The ride was mostly quiet, but not in an uncomfortable way. Just calm. We talked here and there, about school, about our friends, about how weird it was going to be acting normal after everything that had happened. But even in those little conversations, there was a new rhythm between us. A closeness we didn't have to earn anymore. It was just there. At one point, Liam reached over and rested his hand on my knee while he drove. He didn't look at me. He didn't say anything. He just held it there. And that said enough. By the time we got home, the sun was starting to dip again. We carried our bags up to my place first, and when we set them down in the doorway, everything felt too still, like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what we'd do now that the woods were behind us. "I guess this is where we find out if it was real," Liam said, his voice soft. I stepped closer. "It was real." He nodded. "Then what now?" I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his, pulling him just a little closer. We stopped pretending. We stopped wondering. And we figure it out. One day at a time. He let out a breath, not anxious, just relieved. I liked that. We stood in the doorway for a few seconds more, then I leaned in and kissed him. Not like in the sauna. Not like in the quiet of the porch. This one was different. It was the kind of kiss that says, "We're really doing this." When we pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. "I think I've loved you longer than I realized," he whispered. I smiled. "I think I've been waiting for you to say that." He kissed me again, and this time we didn't stop. The days that followed weren't perfect. There were questions, hesitations, moments where we both didn't know what to do or how to explain what we were now to the people who thought they already knew us. But every time it felt scary, every time doubt crept in, I thought about the way Liam looked at me in the sauna, like I was finally being seen. And I looked back at him the same way. Because whatever we were before, whatever we are now, it's real. And it started in a cabin in the woods when everything else fell away. And all that was left was us.